With that, I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Emily Vakili, Vice President of Advisory Services from C3. She's going to moderate our next session. It's titled BC Call for Power Projects, Case Studies in Partnership and Project Delivery. So let's give Emily and her panel a warm IROC welcome.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be sharing the stage today with some fantastic leaders in the renewable energy space. Fantastic. So I'm joined on stage this afternoon by Chief Nicholas Peterson from the Lower Nicola Indian Band, Erica Kabotoff, who is the Mining and Regulatory Engagement Manager with the Nlaka'pamux Assembly, and the wonderful Karina Andrus, Senior Manager, Environmental Permitting from Capstone Infrastructure. Is everyone settled? Everyone has their mics? Fantastic. So we've heard so much discussion around partnerships today, and I'm really excited to be on stage here to chat about the BC Call for Power projects, case studies in partnership and project delivery. I think I certainly want to give you folks a chance to speak to your own experiences through these projects, and would love to start this panel off with an opening question of how has your experience with these BC Call for Power projects and processes really changed how you think about partnership? So I'll start with Erica today, thanks.
Yeah, I think I, as a technical staff, wasn't super involved in some of the initial conversations for building that partnership, but what I can say, doing some of the work now as we're looking to develop the project, partnership is a term that's used in a lot of different industries, and it means a lot of different things depending on who you're talking to and what industry you're speaking about. Whereas with these Call for Power projects, I think it is kind of the true definition of partnership, and there's usually what I've seen in other industries, partnership, when we're talking about it, it's, there's still one, like the proponent still owns the project at the end of the day, whereas with these, it is that joint ownership and that more true partnership. So I think it's definitely been a change and experience, and it's a good shift.
Fantastic. And then Chief Nick, I'll pass it over to you to speak to your experience on how this kind of process has changed how you view partnership, especially stepping in kind of into your new role in leadership.
Thank you. I guess first, Hankla Yarik Shadish and Nicholas Peterson. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Peterson, Chief of Lower Nicola Indian Band. Really grateful to be here. I just want to first acknowledge the Citxw people for allowing us to do this great work, and for the elder offering the prayers this morning so we can remember why we're all here, right, and to reconnect ourselves and to ground ourselves. It is nerve-wracking to be up here. My hands are shaking, right? Some people say I hide it, but inside I'm like that duck swimming really fast. I guess with partnerships, the truth is, right, I'm a newer chief, and so I inherited a relationship or a partnership we have with our wind turbine company, Capstone. And I've thought about that as, how do we be good partners? One of the words I've heard a lot, two words I've heard a lot in the last 2 days is certainty and predictability. And one of the things that creates uncertainty or unpredictability is political changes, right? Amongst First Nations politics, some councils change every 2 years, 3 years. We just recently changed to 4-year term, but that does create possible uncertainty or unpredictability with a partnership. And so I can see the risk as partners are saying, you know, which First Nation should we partner with? There's a hope and a desire for some political stability, and in inheriting that, right, I inherited this relationship, so how do I continue to be a good partner on our side? And I think ultimately there is a lot of personal responsibility that comes from that, from the band side. How do we as a band attract good partnerships? So, you know, we're worthy of investing in, we're worthy of partnership in. Not to take too long, but it reminds me of a lesson I learned really young, well, not really young, but young enough from my mother, when she was asking me, you know, what do you want for your partner, your wife? And I was saying all the wonderful things. Of course, I wanted to be gorgeous and smart and funny and all the great qualities, right? But then, of course, my mom, being wise, just flew it right back at me. So who are you being? You know, what kind of partner do you want to be? And that's exactly the same, right? So on our side, how do we as LNIB attract that business and that partnership that we want to create?
Fantastic. And then Karina, from the proponent perspective, can you speak to what you've learned about partnerships? And
It's taking everything in me not to make a joke about thank you for choosing the most gorgeous developer. I can't not make that joke. So I think for us as developers, I certainly think that it's been reiterated a number of times, but for the BC Hydro call for power, it was rushed. And I think for us, that's certainly a learning is rushed relationships are not easy to make. And so that's one piece. I think for me, the fortunate part of and the exciting part is that I've been working with these partners actually since 2022. I was the Indigenous Environmental Assessment Manager on Tech Highland Valley Copper Mine Life Extension Project, and we worked really well together. From my perspective, of course, but in the sense of working to integrate Indigenous-led assessments into that environmental assessment. So, we didn't start from scratch in terms of our team, but that building at the start was very rushed. And I think for the long-term success of the partners, you just basically have to keep growing and I think building that relationship and building that trust ongoing. And then, and even with the new chief, making sure that we're still engaging the same way we would to come in from the front end of a project, but making sure that we're there for you to understand what this project is and how we can be successful together.
Fantastic. So Chief Nick, the first question is going to go over to you. I would love to hear a bit about your trip when you were in Ontario to go and visit one of Capstone's operating wind projects and hear about kind of your experiences getting to see a site that's in operation and what you took away really from that site visit.
Thank you. Yeah, I did have an opportunity to go see a wind turbine farm in Ontario, just somewhere near Toronto. It all just blended together. And it was very valuable. But maybe I'll start with maybe some concerns, if you will, that I have, and then I'll kind of end on the positive side. Recently, I was lucky enough to participate in a 4-day fast ceremony, and you fast from food and water, of course, which was to be expected. I was kind of mentally prepared for that. But the elder that was helping facilitate that with me, she's like, no, you're fasting from everything. Like, because I was asking her, well, can I bead or can I whittle some wood? Like, I wanted to take a knife and whittle some wood. She's like, no, like, you're going to sit in your circle and be alone with your thoughts. Like, don't occupy your thoughts. Don't whittle or don't craft. No reading, no phone, no nothing. So I had some time to reflect on my thoughts, right? But I kept hearing the damn highway, right? I'm off trying to have this experience on the land, but the highway was somewhat nearby. And when you become, less distracted from all the things that were distracting yourself, you start hearing those small sounds. And when I say it was an impact, and it made me really contemplate what is a wind turbine farm's impact going to be, and to recognize that there's going to be a visual impact. In its weird way, it might be beautiful to see these turbines, but it's going to become increasingly more and more difficult to go somewhere and have a wild space and not have or see some form of impact, whether it's a highway, whether it's a cut block, whether it's wind turbines. And so that is a concern that I do have, and even though I went to this wind turbine farm, there's a visual impact that's going to be there. And it is a concern that I do have, amongst all the other concerns that people are probably familiar with wind turbines. Those are, I guess, the concerns. As far as the positive, it was positive in that I was surprised to see how close agriculture was returned, right? Like a lot of these were owned by farmers, or on farmers' land, I should say. And the agriculture was restored almost right up to the base. I mean, within meters of the base of the wind turbines. So the land was still very usable, if you will, or, being utilized for whatever is necessary. And there were a lot of birds. I know wind turbines get a lot of flack for birds, but I firsthand was able to see, there's a lot of birds chirping. I was physically looking, trying to find dead birds. I didn't see any. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course, we know it does happen, but it's not to the extent that we're maybe sometimes here. It was actually in its own way beautiful, even though it's kind of an industrial site. It was beautiful, and it's not as impactful as I maybe thought. But anyway, those are probably a way longer answer than you needed.
No, that was fantastic. And I guess, Erica, we're hearing from Chief Nick some concerns around potential impacts to land use, visual quality. Love to hear from you about kind of the approach that CNA is taking around stewardship with these projects and really working to take that leadership role in assessing and then mitigating and addressing concerns from communities on those proposed projects.
Yeah, I can take that, and I'll also add some context because I don't remember if it was said at the start. I work for the Citxw Nlaka'pamux Assembly, but Ashcroft Indian Band is obviously the partner on this project. Ashcroft is a part of our organization, one of our participating bands, so they've recognized that CNA has capacity to do things like leading our own Nlaka'pamux impact assessment. Like you've said, Emily, it is going to be a part of the project's assessment, so I think what's really valuable about us being able to be a part of this process is not only do we have staff and our guardians that are boots on the ground doing the field baseline work, they're able to support in the reporting from that kind of more Western focused lens, but also our team, the kind of office people, we get to be involved in writing the application and incorporating Nlaka'pamux knowledge right from the beginning. You know, our principals and our community's voices can be incorporated from the very beginning, the project design, all the way to those mitigations and monitoring programs and what have you. So it's really fully embedded rather than an afterthought, which you might see in other industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe before we move on from that stewardship note, was there anything, Chief Nick or Karina, you wanted to touch on there before we move on to our next question?
Yes, stewardship's quite the word, right? And I think for myself, and I've been able to talk to some of the others here, like one of the things that's heavy on my mind with stewardship is what is it we're really trying to steward or protect? And I think a lot of my energy and effort, and even this, is regarding around economic stewardship, I would say. But how does it really affect my community? And, you know, are my children in care rates going down? Are my incarceration rates going down? Is diabetes going down? You know, all these other human and social measures that I have, like when I hear the word stewardship, I'm like, are those indicators on my mind when it comes to this project? And how does this project influence those things? And, you know, so often we silo things thinking like, well, this is a wind turbine project. Why are you talking about children in care? It's all holistic, right, when we think about the word stewardship. And so there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of pieces to contemplate, and it's a paradox as well, right? As I just mentioned, there's going to be an impact for good and for bad, and how do we measure that as a community and have good stewardship is something we're actively navigating, and we'll probably continually to actively navigate.
Absolutely, thank you. Karina?
I guess for Capstone, we are really taking our lead from our partners in this case, and I think for us, stewardship really looks to speak to how these projects are going to support the communities and support the ways of life that they want to undertake and their livelihoods. And I think overall, as we develop our project further, and as we even just in terms of a technical regulatory lens and working on the application, our applications will include interests and values and those really key components that our partners guide us on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to build on that, Karina, can you speak more about how Capstone approaches building partnerships with, we're hearing these diverse interests and priorities from the nations, how Capstone approaches building partnerships that reflect those diverse priorities?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I guess Capstone's first and foremost is really, again, taking the lead from the communities and our partners, ensuring that we understand that, each community is different. Each community has different objectives, and really our partners have to lead us on that. And so we do take the approach of starting first with a really key lens of listening to our communities and our interests from our partners, and then it's the old adage of do what you say you're going to do, but certainly Capstone tries to undertake it in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a reminder to some folks, I'm really hoping we'll have time for some Slido questions, so don't hesitate to use the QR code that'll be on the screen and submit your questions early so you'll have a better shot of getting them answered. I guess the next question I have for the entire panel is, what has helped build trust in your partnerships during this project development phase? Wondering, Erica, do you want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that have really helped build our relationship. Obviously, Karina said that they have the team in place. Like Karina, I've worked with her since I started at the CNA, so we do have that relationship. But on top of that, we're ready to have hard conversations when we need to. And I think a lot of them we do them in a way where we kind of ground ourselves in why we're here and what is the end goal. Obviously, there's going to be a bumpy road, and that is just a reality of working with two different organizations. But I think that going back to the why and wanting to do something that's better and really lift our standards for how projects can be developed in the territory is why we're all here, and it reminds us of bringing us back to that productive, solutions focused, and building the trust together.
Fantastic. And then Chief Nick, do you want to speak to how this process has looked in building trust within this partnership?
Sure, of course I do. Well, I guess specific to this project, with my own thoughts, I think one of the things that's unique is that we have BC Hydro involved, and there's a purchase power agreement, right? So you kind of know the financials. So it's a little bit unique in maybe other business relationships or other things that you're trying to do, is how do we navigate what's going to happen. So with this particular project, I do think it's a little easier to have trust because there's a lot more transparency, because there's predictability on purchase power. Like what are we going to have with an agreement? And so that does have that, but as far as trust goes, I mean, there's the time-tested values, right? It just takes time, transparency, engage early. Like, I don't have a secret sauce, right? It's the things that I think people know, but you got to do, right? And I do feel Capstone has come often. They're readily available. Whenever I've had a question, they've been Johnny on it, right? It's been really helpful, and so it's just maintaining that.
Absolutely. Karina, do you want to speak to?
I didn't even there's no joke I could do on Johnny on that. But I think for us, Capstone, what's important, and Erica touched on it, we started first with building a team that has history and experience, but we also have engaged and hired in community members, not only, as Erica touched on, to work on baseline studies, but even looking for members to join our team and ensure that we've got that lens as well. And then I think overall, certainly, I think one big part of this whole process for a lot of us is building out of challenges that we've actually experienced together. And any of the renewables in the room that have been working on the BC Hydropower project Call for Powers would talk to the change in the regulatory regime. We've matched those challenges together. That's actually really good at building partnerships and seeing outcomes together. And then I think the last part is just about building the steps together all the way through from a regulatory perspective, the baseline studies, taking those onto, but starting first with the strategy and the planning. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do together? And seeing that common vision that we talked about on other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now we're going to take a few questions from the audience. I'm seeing some really good ones come in through Slido. I guess this one, maybe Chief Nick, if you want to take the first shot at this top one here, what are some of the challenges partnerships may face, and how do you kind of vision overcoming them, strengthening this partnership? I don't love the words of shared and overlapping territory, but it's the reality of one of our challenges that we're going to face, right? When we become a proponent, we have neighbors, right? Blood relatives, family, literally, right? And so how do we continue to have those challenging conversations with our neighbors? It's really important to have a good relationship with our partner, that they bring a lot of that technical aspect and the information or the questions that these communities may have, versus, our perspective. We can maybe bring the governance and the relationship and the cultural component of those challenges that need to happen, and they will happen, and I would say they're starting to happen. I think the technical teams have done an excellent job, but there's still continued work when it comes to our relationships with our neighboring bands and neighboring nations. How do we navigate that is still ongoing and will continue, of course. But that's a real challenge, and we need a good partner to help do that together. And not saying, well, hey, LNIB, you guys do that part. We'll just build the things. There's a relationship there. Absolutely. I saw one pop up and then it disappeared, but Erica, I'd love to hear more about how the role of Nlaka'pamux knowledge in these projects and the kind of process that CNA is leading and kind of the work that's being done to make sure that's incorporated meaningfully into these projects.
I will try my best. The biggest step for us is making sure that we are getting our community's voices and making sure that they're meaningfully incorporated. So CNA, both with the project and independently, we are going into our communities. We're making sure that, you know, they learn about the projects, they understand where they're going to be for this one, you know, understanding the ownership pieces and making sure that, you know, values are, you know, different for each community, but they're also different for the place that we're talking about. So making sure that we're getting like location-specific values and making sure those are being prioritized. And then taking that, and really what my team's job is to make sure that that is incorporated well into a regulatory document, which is not usually the best suited for incorporating Indigenous knowledge. And so we've gotten really creative, and I think kind of maybe like building a puzzle of how we can make sure that our application that is usually they're very like cut and paste, everything's siloed, all the values are very Western focused, but trying to build the application and everything around our project in a way that meets our community's needs, and maybe that is rearranging some things, and it's probably going to look new, but I think it's for the better.
Thank you, Erica. Chief Nick or Karina, do you want to add anything on that topic?
Sure, of course. I was lucky enough, before I was chief, I worked on the cumulative effects and was also helping work with our land guardians team, and that really helped. So we went out and we were doing bird surveys, and you would sit with these, what are bird people, ornithologists? They're brilliant, by the way, and they know like the sounds, and it was really cool to witness. And we were able to sit and have these conversations like, okay, I can see this Western knowledge piece, and you know, they might know the Latin names and you know all these things, but where's, for me, like, that Indigenous piece or the spiritual connection, or you know, how do we involve you know, Sasquatch in these areas? And so with our land guardians team, we were able to be out there, and they're still out there, right? They're doing the work continually, and speaking with their elders and having community engagement, like that's a never-ending thing, right? So that's happening, and having those continuous engagements and just other considerations, right? That two-eyed seeing is something we hear often, but bringing that component and the deeper connections that we have to it all.
Thank you, Chief. Karina?
I mean, I'm taking the lead, of course, from everything that they've said, but I think being open to it from the way we're developing our application. We're not structured in a way. We've got some great folks helping us. We've got a big team that helps us to work towards getting a successful application that really speaks to it. And I guess what I've said, and like all along since I started with the team anyway, is the applications will be reflective of that real true partnership and the inclusion of Indigenous knowledge directly in the application.
Yeah, absolutely. Karina, I have one more question for you, the top one there, and then we'll go to closing remarks. But as a proponent, how do you define success, you know, through partnership beyond revenue and economic benefit?
That's a good question. Certainly, I think for Capstone, you know, we didn't really speak too much to it, but I think one of the big successes is we have, you know, other opportunities potentially in the province coming up, and you know, and I think one of the things Chief Nick and Capstone have been talking about is there's other potentials, and when a partner can come back to you and want to work with you again, that's a huge success for us. But I think overall, at the end of the day, you know, Erica touched on it. We can have hard conversations. We can work through issues and challenges. I think the revenue and the economic benefit part is the starting part of the relationship, really, and then, you know, the ending or the ongoing piece. You know, we're owner operators. We're here for the long haul, and these are our partners for the long haul. So that partnership is about success for everybody, and most importantly, the partnership success at the end of the day is for a long term.
Thank you. To wrap this up, I have one last question for you all, and is that the request to give kind of this audience here one piece of advice, if whether they're a proponent or a First Nation looking to form a partnership similar to these on this sort of project, through your experience, kind of one piece of advice you'd want folks to walk away with. So Chief, I'll save you for the last word, so I'll start with Erica.
Okay, I'll try and think of something different than I think Nick is going to say. I would say for proponents who are, wanting to partner with communities, even if you think you have the right team and you think that they're really experienced working with communities, this for a lot of communities is different. So you have to come with an open mind, and I think also no assumptions. It's something that we talk a lot about is even if you think you know what you're walking into, you might not. And so being open-minded and actually listening to what communities have to say. And of course, it's really important to foster relationships with leadership, but also community members generally too, and being open to do that before anything is signed, I think shows a sign that you're coming in a good way, and making sure that you're open to whatever their needs are, can help build that foundation. Now that there's time to build a strong foundation before partnerships are formed.
Thanks, Erica. Karina, one piece of advice.
I just echo, obviously, what Erica's saying, but I think that piece of listening, starting early, obviously everybody's heard it, but the piece that's there is the giving the time and the space for those difficult conversations. It'll help build that trust and understanding. The assumptions piece, it's really that check-in to add on to it, right? Like it's not making assumptions, but when you have heard something, checking that what you've heard is actually what you've heard will save you a lot of time and effort if you just remember that. And then I think the last part of that is really start off with a yes and rather than a can't do approach.
Chief, I'll give you the last word. One piece of advice for our audience.
I think one of the reasons why I'm chief is because of who my grandparents were, John Shooter and Josephine Cootley. And their house was kind of on the main corridor between the town and our village site. So everybody stopped at Grandma's. And of course, if you stop at Grandma's, well, you got to stop and visit. And essentially, are you here to have a cup of coffee and a quick biscuit and get on the road, or are you here to stay? And if you're here to stay, well, she'd put you to work, and you would have to tan hides, or you'd have to weed the garden. Like you had to do something. And so my question or advice would be like, when you're coming into our communities, are you here to take, or are you here to stay, right? And the advice is, come to our communities to stay. Weed the gardens, tan the hides, and of course, yeah, you can have coffee and biscuits too, but don't have a relationship where it says, I'm here to take. I gotta hit the road and hit the next community. So my advice would be is have that mentality of longer term vision, right? We know with wind turbines, they're gonna be on the horizon for at least 30 years, but we're here to stay. And if those are the type of relationships you wanna build, come to LNIB. If not, have your biscuit and leave. Chook.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Karina. And thank you all for sticking around. It's been a wonderful day and a fantastic panel. I would also like to thank Nlaka'pamux Nation for hosting us in their beautiful territory. It's been wonderful. So I'll pass it back to my colleague Logan, and if we can grab a quick photo, and we'll have a speaker gift for you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily and panel. While they take a quick photo, I just want to tell you all a little bit about what the rest of the evening will look like. We're going to kick off our keynote dinner tonight at 6 p.m. featuring Bill Lomax, who's the President and CEO of the First Nations Bank of Canada. Please be in the room by 6 o'clock, and note that this is a ticketed dinner, so if you have a ticket, it'll be in the back of your name badge. After dinner tonight, we invite all conference attendees to join us for the Res Dog Walkers After Dark reception. That's off-site. It's at the Coast Bastion Hotel, just up the road. It starts at 8 o'clock, and all of you should have a complimentary drink ticket for that in the back of your badge as well. And with that, I'm going to invite you all to join us for our trade show networking reception, which begins right away and runs until 6 o'clock. You should all have one of these blue drink tickets in your bag or in your badge. It sounds like we're drinking a lot tonight. So I encourage you all to go and use that and network with your colleagues. With that, I ask you all please to leave the room promptly so the VICC staff can change the linens, and thank you all very much.